So one of the things I want to look at is there are those lectures. If you go into MindTap, there are video lectures. There are things that I want to talk about differently or add to. And so one of the things I really want to add in or talk about in here is our book goes into a lot of depth about different types of what we call malware. So they say, what's the difference between a virus and a worm and a Trojan? And for this class, that's appropriate. But the reality is, do the common end users care if it's a virus or a worm or a Trojan? What do they really care about? That their data is compromised and that their computer or system doesn't work. Is that correct? Yeah. So, I just want to make sure we understand that. There are some differences. And so one of them is, how do I make these things travel from one computer to the other? And we now have some that do all kinds of combinations of these trying to infect. So if we remember, we talked about Stuxnet early on in that video. Stuxnet didn't travel across the network necessarily. It was able to infect itself off of a flash drive and then spread. And so we have all different kinds of what we call attack vectors, places that we can get into a system. So anybody here parents work at Cooper Nuclear? Good. All right, we can talk about them. So Cooper Nuclear, like a lot of high security places, they work on what's called an air gap system. So the computers that are running the nuclear plant are not connected to the internet. Well, that's probably pretty good, right? But you have things like Stuxnet that are designed to bypass that, and they bypass that by embedding themselves, in that case, on a flash drive. Do those systems that are in that air-gapped room, so in other words, they're not connected to the internet, do they still need updates and changes and applications? Yeah. So even if a user then says, all right, I'm going to put this file on my flash drive, and they carry it in, now you've broken that air gap or that system that in theory was supposed to protect them. And that certainly happened in Iran with the nuclear centrifuges. So we have to be a little careful about, just because we think it's isolated, it isn't necessarily always safe. So what Cooper has done is they have implemented a plan like most places do, where I want to put this flash drive in. They have a dedicated computer/kiosk. You plug it in and it scans for that file. Well, if that software is written well, it may be able to get around that system. So never take anything for granted. There's always some end run that we can do, so we have to be careful and see what's going on. So some of the things we do to get around that air gap problem, we're going to install software. In a lot of cases, we have what we call a sandboxed system. So it's identical to the production environment. So it's going to run the nuclear plant, except it's not actually running anything. It's running a simulated plant. We put our software in there and we try it and we verify that it's going to work. So over time we look at it, and so you tend to be a little behind. If you went into the nuclear plant or a lot of high security places, you're going to go, man, these guys have ancient computer gear, right? It doesn't look at all like this new fancy high-tech stuff when I managed to get into the Google data center. It doesn't look like that. And that's on purpose, because that stuff has to be vetted and went through there. The reality is things like our nuclear program, both production of power and, in fact, if you want to look at our nuclear weapons system for our federal government, they're on pretty old hardware. But it's been vetted. They know what it's going to do, and they've looked at it. So I want to talk really quickly about this idea of a rootkit, because you guys did a rootkit examination. So these are a really, really, really sneaky way that some of these virus builders, makers, creators, coders, whatever you want to call them, have come up with. And so what I wanted to show you is this idea. So when I look at a computer, that's actually the actual list of files. But because that rootkit is buried into the operating system and buried even in the file system in some cases, what we only see is the files that it wants you to see. It can bury itself and hide it. And that's why it's fairly intrusive, is we have a hard time even getting rid of it because it's buried in there. So I want to look at this concept really quickly also, the idea of spyware. How many like stuff for free in here? Anybody like free stuff? Huh. So you think software, when you go out on the internet, there is software that's very generously donated, but there's a lot of software that they generate revenue by including spyware. So in other words, I run a company and I'd like to get tracking information about where people go, where they shop, what they're looking for. And so I'm going to be willing to pay you $1 every time somebody downloads your program if you can just add me right in there. All right, that's great. So a couple of things that tend to make spyware. In other words, you don't have adequate notice. Now, there may be a checkbox that says, all right, you're able to get in there and say I want this or not. But if it's written in a language you don't understand, it doesn't do much good. And sometimes we don't have the ability to control it. And there are some new ones coming out that are really interesting. So, different ways they can get there. But one of the more interesting ones, has anybody heard of Bitcoins or cybercurrency? If you were in my class last year, we talked a lot about it. Well, guess what? They've come up with spyware that can actually mine. See, I can't really apparently record the air quotes, but it mines for Bitcoins. They're a mathematical operation. You look for these coins that are hidden in the abstract realm. Well, one computer, it takes a lot of effort for one computer to mine 1 Bitcoin. And in fact, I think the going rate on Bitcoin, if you had one computer with a fairly high-end graphics card processing, it'd take now like 50,000 years or something to mine one. But what we have to do then is we gather up a whole ton of computers. Well, we do it through spyware, and we do it through browsers that are infected. And so if I can get 1 million computers all running that mathematical operation, well, guess what? I can get a lot closer to finding those Bitcoins or those other cyber currencies. And there's a lot of other ones. We just kind of use Bitcoin. Kind of like when you say, I'm going to Google for something, when you're really meaning I'm going to search for something. A lot of times we talk about Bitcoins the same way. So these are some of the ways we now can get spyware and different pieces. So they may have an automatic download. So they may download software without you even knowing about it. Hides it in the background. A lot of times they collect information about you. They search your computer for information about you. And so a lot of times we find that they store and retrieve a lot of information that you don't realize about it. So we talked about the keyloggers really quickly. So this is that idea of a hardware version. So you did a software version. This is a hardware version that does very similar things. Now, there are 2 different models of these. So there is a model that when it's plugged in, it does go out on the web and sends your data. There's another model that just has a little bit of storage in it, and it will store your keystrokes, and then somebody has to actually remove it and take it to their computer to download it. So if I'm in a fairly high security place where at their firewalls and different things, they're going to notice that traffic, I use one of these that I just plug in and store the data. Maybe I store it for a week, and then I come back in. And we talked about the idea of social engineering. Does anybody pay any attention to janitors in a building? If you're a very busy building and you had a new janitor, would you even notice? So I come in, I'm looking like I'm a janitor. Not today, I wore a shirt. I might tomorrow. So I come in, I'm looking like a janitor. Is anybody going to notice? I'm sweeping your floors. I'm back behind your computer. It look like I'm dusting and I've unplugged your keyboard, plugged in this device. So these are a very real threat. And you think, well, who cares about the stuff I do? I work at a university researching corn crops. That has actually been a recent case in Iowa where they store information about genetically modified corn crops. And it was actually the Chinese government was one of them behind it, unfortunately. So here's my favorite. Because I'm cheap. I don't like to buy stuff if I don't have to. So sometimes I will get a program that has built-in ads because I'm too cheap to buy it. So a little ad every once in a while is not bad, but sometimes if it's popping up frequently, if it crashes, has different advertising banners, different types of things, it can be obnoxious, obtrusive, and not allow us to get our work done. So we do have to be careful about that. The other thing in a lot of cases, if it's already got adware with banners, is it also got some spyware and stuff you don't know about? It's possible. But you also see this listed. So one of the programs I've talked about in other classes, and we'll look briefly at here, is called something called Spiceworks. And Spiceworks is a great program. It's free. It's owned. The company has sponsored by Dell and a couple other companies. But if I don't want to pay the $25 a year, I get ads on the side. And in this case, they're targeted, computer advertisements, and it actually makes some sense. But when all of a sudden my screen gets 37 pop-ups or pop-unders for different ads, it's not necessarily a great thing. So we have to be a little careful about it. Anytime they want something in return, we have to be careful. Now, that said, are there free programs that are great because they were done in open source? Yes, and we're going to look at some of them. And this is the malicious, horrible thing that is happening now everywhere. So, this is called ransomware. It is now run like a business. So, what this does, it says, there is something wrong with your computer in most cases. So it'll pop up and says, hey, you need to call Microsoft at 1-800-747 blah, blah, blah. They answer the phone. And they go, well, we'd like you to put on a remote control program. And they will guide you through how to install this remote control program and take over your computer. If you guys get a pop-up that says from Microsoft and you call, would you call it? Probably not. However, I get about one call a week from somebody who says, my grandmother, my grandfather, my mom, whatever, has ran into this. What do I do? Shut down the computer and walk away. It is not legitimate. So the other part of this that's even worse is there's another piece of ransomware that we've seen, and that is things like the CryptoLocker. So it doesn't say anything's wrong with the computer. What it generally does is it can be installed from a file, which is the most common way, but it can also be actually just because if your network has openings and there's some ways that it can actually infiltrate, it actually sits there and takes all of your files and it encrypts them. It scrambles all of your files. And then after it gets done or really close to done, it pops up a message on the screen and says, you have 100 hours or 60 hours or some amount of time to pay however much. Usually the term used to be 2 or 3 Bitcoins. Bitcoins went to almost $20,000 a share. That got a little expensive. But you'll see that they have a price, generally $600 to $3,000. And they say, if you pay that, we will give you the key to unscramble your files. They very much run it like a business, and I know people that have paid that, and they did get a key, and they were able to get their files back. Last year, it is estimated that the CryptoLocker generated $67 million in revenue. Crazy. But it happens, and it's happened around here. Now, there's a couple of things with it. I get my files back. Am I still paranoid that this is on my system? Yeah. And so I'm going to be doing something. Am I also going to kick my IT guy in the butt because there's no backups? Because quite frankly, the companies that I have been associated with that I had some say in, and they listened to me, which doesn't always happen, when they ran into this, what we simply did was we said, all right, we're going to roll back and grab the backups, and you may lose, however, X number of hours or days worth of work, but it's not worth doing that. And so it does happen, because a lot of people and software requires administrative privilege. It can happen. And most of them show up and they look like, here's your tracking info from UPS. And so it looks like a PDF file, but it actually runs in the background, this program. Well, if you run a business, do you get stuff from UPS, FedEx all the time? Yeah, and it looks very legitimate. And so training people how to stop that, doing things where we talk about standard accounts versus administrative accounts. No matter what you do, though, people will always be bigger idiots than you think they can be. And so this one is a case of that. So there's been hospitals that have been hit with this, and they have wanted thousands of dollars to get this information back. And if they don't have backups, if they don't have things in place, that may be the cheapest option, unfortunately. Now, there's some other issues in terms of, is it legal and ethical to do that? And so there may be, are any of you guys accounting majors? You guys have, oh yeah. You have to deal with legal and ethical issues. So whether it's kosher and germane is possible. But so this is one you've seen that it seems to be out there. So it plays on people's fears. So I'm pretty sure I don't really need to worry about child porn on my computer, right? But if you've been on the fringes of the internet and you downloaded some files, not saying any whoa. Why are you turning red back in the corner? Do we need to have an intervention? No, okay. So, if you've been there, maybe you don't know what your kids have done, and you get this and it says, hey, the FBI is coming to get you. Well, you guys are smart enough to know the FBI is not going to put a message on your web page and then come in 72 hours later and come, would you come with us, please? But are there a lot of people that aren't that smart? Yeah. Or you're in a panic, and they're hard to get off the screen. So in some cases, it locks it to the screen and you can't do anything. The best one I saw was it actually changed the wallpaper to this. And so they didn't realize how they could get rid of it. And this particular individual, I have to say, that called me with this one, he started out the conversation with this phrase. Hey, I don't know what's going on. I do watch a lot of porn, but this message is on my screen. You should probably go to Best Buy, I think was my response. So these things happen. People do pay those, though. So we have a lot of those scams going on. So here's one that says, here's an internet security issue. This one's really common. Installs a program. All of this is just canned BS. It doesn't really have any. And what they're wanting you to do in some cases is download their internet security version of some kind of browser, and they want money. Great. None of that's true. This is the virus or the malware. Great. But people fall for it. So I wanted to point that out. So the logic bombs are interesting. Make sure you've read about them when they go off. These actually happen more frequently than you think. People think, oh man, I'm going to get fired, so I'm going to do something. And it's really easy to write a batch script that deletes all the files on your computer on a certain date. And unless I go in and remove that file, because I got fired, all the files get deleted. And maybe that's the information for the server logins or something else. So these actually happen. People get so disgruntled at their jobs. This happens a lot also. We have backdoor into software, including operating systems. So if you're the paranoid type, is anybody in here paranoid already wearing a tinfoil hat? A couple of you. So the speculation is that Macintosh and Windows build in backdoors so that the NSA and other government agencies can get in on your computer at any time. Heck, it might be true. But we certainly do give them enough areas that they can find their way on anyway. But a lot of times we do that. So it's a way to get around security when we're coding a program. Because maybe it's as simple as we don't want to type in the username and password every 13 seconds or something crazy as we're coding it. So we bypass the user logins. Or we create a login that's got access to every piece of it because we're doing it for testing and we forget to take it out. So not too long ago, I worked on a database. And historically, a long time ago, there used to be these databases, and we used them, and some of you may be in database class. So Oracle, for a long time, when you installed a product with Oracle and their test database that you could use for proof of concept or testing, used the administrative name Scott and Tiger for the password. No reason why. Do you know how many databases, though, you can log into with Scott and Tiger? Because people forgot to take out those test environments. So again, it's a backdoor people don't realize is setting in there. This is a new model, and we've actually seen some really interesting. One of the bot control and command centers was actually down in Kansas City, and they pulled rack after rack of computers out of Kansas City because they had, I think, 40 million bots around the world. But what it was interesting was the federal government knew about it. They came in and took control of it for a while and then actually removed them and shut it down. Not immediately. They wanted to see what was going on and what was being used for this. So this, when I say I have a computer that's a zombie or a bot, I can actually go on what's called the IRC, which is the Internet Relay Chat System. And there's some chat rooms you can find if you wander around in the far enough reaches. And you can actually buy. So a whole lot of things. But one of the things you can buy is you can buy control of a set of bots. And you can buy them by the thousands. So if I want 10,000 computers and I want to be able to control them, I can do that. Why would I want 10,000 computers? What could I do with 10,000 computers? It would be really cool to brag to your buddies, I got 10,000 computers under my thumb, right? But think about this. You ever been mad and you think you really should have had a snow day when you didn't? And you thought, man, I'd like to get even with Peru State College. And you know what? I bet they couldn't have school if their website wasn't visible on the internet, right? If I just blasted their internet site. Because I know that their server It can handle a few people logging into the website, but could it handle 10,000 people at once logging into Peru.edu? What's going to happen? No. So a denial of service attack is one of the things. There's a lot of other things, but one of the most common ones is a denial of service attack. So in other words, there's only maybe 1,000 spots that people can check into the Peru's website. Now we're going to show you some other tools later on, but if I suddenly hit Peru's website with 10,000 computers all trying to get onto the website and access the calendar, what's going to happen to the calendar and the computer? And it's going to be over there, smoke coming out of it, and probably you're not going to get on the website. We do the same thing to the Blackboard login maybe. And you can't get on Blackboard, and that's a great way that you don't have to turn in a homework on a Sunday night because Blackboard's shut down, right? No, bad idea. I saw some glimpses of hope going out there. So this idea of botnets is one that you're going to see over and over and over again. So you'll see that. And I've talked a lot about this idea of social engineering. And in fact, the very first day of class, I social engineered you guys to all go out outside, right? I used my influence to go out and walk you out into the hallway. So a lot of it's psychological. I know there's anybody in here a psychology major. Somebody online is, I think. Normally we do. So we have psychological approaches. And we'll show you some other pieces of that. Psychology, though. How do I manipulate people? We know that some things manipulate people. And we can, if I give you something, you want to reciprocate with a gift of your own. And in our brains, we don't associate that gift as being equal value. So it's part of the reason, if you get a sales guys buy you lunch a lot, right? If you're in a company, they come in and go, hey, let's buy you lunch and talk about our newest products. Because it's a known psychological fact. They spent $10 on a meal and they sold you $100,000 worth of widgets. Because we have that reciprocation in our mind. It's no secret that men are pigs, right? All the ladies in here go, yes, men are pigs, right? Why do you think it is pharmaceutical sales are filled with young, 22-year-old, attractive young women? Think about that one when you go into a doctor's office and you see a pharmaceutical sale, because they know psychologically, and the really good salesmen know how to put on the act. And there's the 60-year-old gnarly doctor, but they're, hey, would you like some of these? You need these Paxil pills. Now, it's over-exaggerated, but it happens. It's that psychological weaknesses we have. And so if we know men are pigs, we can get away with things. Not that women are always great, but we know that there's ways we can do it. So there's some basic principles, and we'll talk a lot about this. But the other day, which one did I use to walk you out in the hallway? I used authority, right? But we are all victim to some of these. How many of you go shopping and you see the ads that says, one day only sale on a car? And the next thing you know, you're in the Ford dealership buying a new Ford, right? That's scarcity. People respond to that. Intimidation. Well, that's fairly common. That familiarity, because we know that person. So some way to get them, some way to get that confidence, that trust. Urgency. When you see those spam emails, that sense of urgency. Hey, buy now, the sale's going to end quickly. Some way, hey, your account got hacked, you better log into through this email here into your CEO account. Wait a minute, I don't have a CEO account. So all of these tools get used. We see them, though, a lot of times in bars. So you'll see the same techniques that people use in bars. So, information. The more information they have, the better they can do it. Flirtation. Really creepy. Sometimes it's just that I want to look helpless. So I'm standing outside the door of a major building, and I'm just standing there with a miserable look on my face. And it doesn't always work in a small building because you only have a limited number of people. But if you're in a big building that's got 1,000 employees, you don't know everybody on site, do you? And you've got the right outfit, you've got the suit, or you've got the whatever, and you're sitting at the door and waiting for somebody to come up, and you go, man, I'm sorry, I left my card on my desk when I went up to go get a smoke. Oh, man, let me just buzz you in here for you. Now you're in the building. I've got physical access now, that easy, because it made me seem like I was going to be there. So walking in, if you have a jacket on that says AT&T phone services, you can wander around a building as long as you know what you look like, you know what you're doing. You have a clipboard in your hand and it looks like a work order. You say, hey, I need to go work on the phone system here. Oh, here, let me let you into the data closet. Here you go. It's that easy, guys. It really is. And sometimes they combine in weird ways. So I tried that approach. I'm the computer tech at a corporation I was doing some penetration testing for. Happened to be a bank. And I walk in, hey, I got to do this with the computer, blah, blah, blah. Oh, well, let me just help you. Let me walk you back here. You'll have to get with Dick or whoever it was a supervisor, but here's the data closet. Just stand here and wait. All right, now I'm in the back of a bank. Door into the data closet. So that data closet there was about half the size of this room. Glass walls. It was very impressive. Lots of blinky lights. And I had heard a rumor, because the other thing is that fact-finding. And so one of the things I always did when I do those things is I do a little fact-finding. I try to figure out some information. What I had found out through the grapevine was that the employees had noticed that that server room had a card swipe. But it didn't matter what kind of card you slid into it, it would open the door. So what had happened, when they install a door with like a card swipe, a mag lock, or any of those kinds of things, they install it and it's in what's called test mode. Because you don't want to install the door and get locked in, right? So any card will work to activate it. So they have it in test mode. It never got taken out of test mode. Nobody had noticed it, because if you had a card that was activated and ready to go, and supposed to be the right card, swipe, you're in, right? But any card, including my hotel key at the Drury Inn, would open that door. So when the guy came back from the network team, I'm standing in his data closet saying, hi! And that's when it got a little interesting. So apparently police respond really quickly to banks. Let's just say that. But no. Luckily, I had a letter from the bank president saying we're doing these things. So I did have a little bit of protection and nobody was going to shoot me, hopefully. But the reality is that kind of silly mistake, could that have been very expensive for that bank? Yeah. And we found some other things that were really creepy, scary. So a lot of times it's that idea of carrying out that role. Trusted employee. Liaison. Say you're the CEO's girlfriend. Maybe they've never met the girlfriend. Or even more, because you embarrass them, you say, well, I'm kind of dating the CEO. I know he's married, but we've been having this fling, so can I get up to his office? People will just, oh, God, I don't want to know. Here, go there, go up there. Doesn't usually work for me. I'm not young, cute, and attractive, but I have seen people do that. So a couple of other quick things that we see all the time. Phishing. And you guys get those emails every day, I suspect. They do have sometimes legitimate information. They do go out, fish, and find information about you. And in fact, when we target those specifically towards individuals, so we may send out in bulk a giant group of emails, but if I know some more information about you, let's pick on, who should I pick on today in here? So I know that Chloe is the CEO of a corporation. I get more information about her. I send an email cleverly crafted just to her, because I use that information. And there are perpetrators that they have data centers. They're sitting around collecting information about you, and you'd be amazed what information you can find out about you. And then I finish that off by saying, well, now I just need a password. Hi, I'm the IT department, and we've been having a problem with your computer. We were going to remote log in, but I don't want to disturb all your files. Can you just let me borrow your password so I can log in? Sure. And I'm in your computer. So, other things, bank account, health information. And in fact, healthcare information right now is more valuable than your credit card information. Why is that? Why do you think that would be? Why is health information valuable? So let's ask this question. Does anybody in here have a $100,000 line of credit on their credit card? Wow, Mason, we got to talk. We're going shopping. Does anybody? So $100,000 worth on a credit card. If you got a credit card and you stole it from somebody, it'd be pretty hard to get $100,000 out of it. You'd have to go to several Best Buys, and you'd have all these little pieces you got to fence off. So you might end up with $500 off somebody's credit card, right? Okay. On the other hand, if I'm really smart and I set up a fake doctor and I bill Medicaid and Medicare because I've got all your health care information, what does it cost to have one surgery? An appendicitis. Is that 50 grand easy? Yeah. So what if I start billing Medicaid and Medicare and insurance companies for millions of dollars? Because I've got your health care information, and that's one of the things we're finding is health care information is more valuable than other personal information. Because once we do that, we can start billing. It is pretty easy to rack up a couple $1 million in a hospital. And it's really easy to bill the government because sometimes they don't notice that these things are bad. Now, they do catch a few people, but not that many. So, I'm not telling you that that would be a great idea, but if you want to find a way to steal money, either A, go to become a doctor legitimately, or set up your own fake medical practice, get some information, and start billing out insurance companies. It happens a lot. So this is an example of a phishing email. And so this one uses a couple of those techniques. It says, hey, you sent a payment to us. What? Wait, no, I didn't. Let me log in. I didn't pay nobody $1,200 because most of us have our PayPal account linked to our normal banking account. And I can tell you what, my wife would, I would have a cow if there were $1,200 gone out of my bank account. First of all, they'd probably go, no, can't do that. So they use that urgency and all these techniques to kind of take you up and go, nope, I'm going to log in. And if we look, these look legitimate, don't they? PayPal.com. But when I actually click into the link, does it take me to PayPal? No. No. So one of the things I commonly tell people is, if you get a phishing email and you think it all is legitimate, and it's from Citibank and you have a Citibank account and it's got some of your information, you know what? Stop. Call Citibank on the phone number that's on your credit card and say, hey, I got this. Is this really true? Put it in your court, because sometimes they are really, 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 really good. And so a couple of years ago, my now wife actually got a call from Wells Fargo. Shows up on the caller ID as Wells Fargo, and we know that we can spoof that. And it was talking about a consolidation loan for her house and all this other, and she had talked about it at one point, so she's like, well, maybe they're responding, maybe I did put in a form, and whatever else. And so she's thinking about it, and she's like, well, and he had a lot of information, including several of the account numbers. But something kind of felt off, and so she called me. She says, I'll call you back, and he gave her a number, and the number really checked out to going sorted at Wells Fargo. But, still there was just something off about it, because what he wanted was things like the last four of the social and some other pieces to fill in there. And it really felt weird. And so what I did was I actually called Wells Fargo fraud hotline, because they actually had a fraud hotline. Not that Wells Fargo isn't a company full of frauds, but whatever. But we called them and they go, yeah, we've been having this issue. They managed to break into some of our accounts apparently, or they found them, and so they had 99% of the money, or 99% of the information to go ahead and do a loan out, or somehow pull money back out of accounts, and it was, so, I'd like to think my wife's not an idiot, and I could have fallen for it. It's easy. These people work very hard at this. My dad got scammed not too long ago for a couple $1,000s on something. And you know what? My dad used to be a cop. Now, he's 84 years old now. He's not thinking quite as well. But they're really good at what they do. And they managed to do that. They actually started calling him and scamming him right after my mom died. And that's one of the things they look for on those phishing emails and phishing phone calls is deaths in families and things. Because they know that, if you've been married 47 years, your spouse passes away, are you vulnerable? And that's what they look for, is those vulnerable people. They try to get you. Deceptive links. So make sure you look at the link. Is it really authentic? So the other thing, you'll oftentimes see in these emails, they have weird misspellings. Sometimes it may look like it's a non-native speaker of English typing that. That may be the case. The other thing that I think is interesting is there are several scammers that actually have said, we misspell some of that stuff on purpose. And here's why. We know that very smart people that are going to catch those spelling mistakes aren't going to respond to them, and we don't have to spend our resources dealing with them it's only people who are a little lower on the food chain in terms of perceptiveness. Those are the people we want. They target their customers that specifically. Isn't that a little creepy? Not only are they finding you, they're dragging you around, they're pulling money out of your accounts. So there's all kinds of variations of that. So you'll see the one, when I have specific users, we call it a spear. So, you've got a spear tip. Oftentimes, if we look at somebody who's a very wealthy individual, CEOs, they call it whaling. So if you're a whale at a casino, that means you've spent a ton of money there, right? Like your brother. No, just kidding. He'd like to be. So we also have the idea of phone phishing, which is actually happening a lot now. So you'll start seeing this as we get closer to the IRS tax season. You're getting the calls from people saying, hey, this is the IRS calling. If you don't pay us $10,000 today, we're going to have you come arrested. Wait, really? Okay. Didn't know that was going to happen. So, spam, we see tons of it. You'll see all these. So here, for example, the discount pharmacy online, blah, 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 blah. What's interesting about spam is the volume of spam. So I administer a couple of firewalls, email filters for some projects, and I have seen what we do at the college. So at the college, for example, we're over 350,000 emails a day that come into the college. 3 to 5% of those are legitimate emails that do not get screened out. And even that 3 to 5%, large numbers of those are ones that we just don't have a way yet to spam those out and to figure out how to get it. If you could come up with a foolproof way to eliminate spam mail, you would make Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates look like they're paupers. You could have the 1,000-foot yacht. There's not been any way yet, but a lot of times they will have this weird nonsensical text in it, and they will use images instead of text because that can, in some cases, bypass those filters. But depending on the industry, sometimes even spam filtering is hard. So because I've done some work in the healthcare industry, there are terms in the healthcare industry. I can't just block the word Viagra out because, hey, guess what? It's a legitimate word. And as I found out, I thought, well, okay, surely we can eliminate the word boob. If it shows up with boob, no, because a lot of our patients in their emails refer to those parts as boobs, not breasts. Great. And all the other words you can think of for medical terminology, can't do that either. So some of these fields, it's very hard to even try to figure out what is spam and what isn't. So you'll see a lot of other things, hoaxes and all different kinds of other things. So one of the best ones is that idea of it's a false hoax. It says, hey, you've got these files on your computer and they're causing an issue. Well, they're legitimate Windows files, but you don't know that from the name. And you go, oh yeah, it's really in this C:1 in this file, let me delete it. Well, now you've just killed your own computer. It happens. So, you've probably had this happen. You type in the wrong address and you end up with the wrong site. So there are lookalike sites. So if I type Goggle instead of Google, it happens to be there. Sometimes it's legitimate, and sometimes it's kind of entertaining. So you do have to be aware of that URL. Make sure that you get the correct URL when you're going to go somewhere. So it wasn't really typo squatting, but I do have a funny story. So there is a company that sells point-of-sale systems, POS. And they're called Cyber Guys POS. There's a hyphen in cyber and guys. However, I had an office manager at a company that I did a little work with. They called me and they were nearly in tears because if you type that in without the hyphen, it is a hardcore male gay porn site. And apparently they did that in front of, this was a small city actually, and they did that in front of the mayor and city council. It happens, guys. So some of those they're kind of funny. In that case, it was kind of funny. But then, of course, it's also those sites, in that particular case, it's spawning off like all these ads, and I probably shouldn't have laughed quite as much as I did, but it does happen. So be aware of where you're typing, because sometimes you end up in places you don't want to go. So the other things, there's the idea of watering holes where people go. So useful sites, but you know that all the CIOs go. So if there's a CIO blog, hey, I'm going to find out information about people because I'm here. Old-fashioned dumpster diving. Anybody dumpster dived in here? Really? Oh, I know you do for books. So the reality is people throw out all kinds of stuff and information. So if I go dumpster diving, I'm looking for all that information. People haven't shredded stuff. I'm looking for internal manuals, those kinds of things. I can sometimes find all different kinds of things because people don't realize they're there. And so I'm not going to name the company, but I was involved in foster care and I had a foster child and I now have adopted, blah, blah, blah. But when the child was 1 year old, we had some issues with the company that was doing the foster care work, and including the worker wanted me to just leave it with the obviously intoxicated birth mom, blah, blah, blah. So I was a little frustrated. What I found, it wasn't directly dumpster diving, but their website wasn't very well protected. And what I found was their internal phone list when I did a little diving, a little digging, and may or may not, I won't reveal anything else. But, so I couldn't get a hold of the caseworker or the caseworker's boss, but guess what I found was the CEO's cell phone number. No, it was not, but statute of limitations have passed, so it's okay. So the CEO of the company got a phone call, and he was very surprised that his cell phone was ringing and that I was ripping his butt and explaining how I was going to go and do all these various things, none of which were illegal in any means, just throwing that out there. But I was very uncomfortable with the situation, and I got his attention. But all those kinds of things are out there. People don't know where to hide them. So there's a lot of different ones. And so I described the idea here called tailgating. So the other thing that I want to point out really quickly, because our book doesn't tell you, you guys have the greatest spy device in your pockets. Has anybody got a phone with a camera? Holy cow. How easy is it for you to hold that camera up and look like you're texting, but really what you're doing is video recording somebody walking in a door and their punch code? Pretty darn easy, isn't it? Think about that one a little bit. You're at that ATM. Up there. Got your ATM pin now. I combine that with a skimmer that I put on there because I wanted the card swipe number. Now I can recreate your card. I can just empty your bank account. All right, so what I want to do really quickly, though, is I want to go over VirtualBox. So if your ISO image is still downloading, would you please find somebody next to you that has been through this process? So I know it takes a while to download that. So what we want to do is look at this and go through a couple of the basics, because there are some issues that people run into commonly. And so I can point out those pitfalls. There is, in week 1, an entire video of every step of this downloaded. But we wouldn't want to look at that. All right, so if you will join me, we installed VirtualBox the other day. So now I'm going to start VirtualBox. If I get over here really quickly. If I can type. Now I'll need to move it into the right spot. Go VirtualBox. All right. So right now, I'm going to cancel that. All right. So right now, let's pretend I don't have that install already done. So yours all looks blank. It doesn't have anything in it yet. So I'm going to click the obvious button. I'm going to click New. And New says, all right, so now I'm creating this container for Windows to live in. That's what I'm starting out doing. And so this container, if I type Windows 10, notice it automatically says, oh, it says it's Windows and it's got 10, and it makes some settings for me that are really nice. So it automatically finds some settings for Windows 10. And so I'm going to call this Cyber Class or something else so I know which one it is. Maybe put your name behind it. But if you start typing that Windows 10, it's a keyword. It knows that. It's really smart, grabs it, and it says, okay, so we're going to create this virtual machine. I'm going to click the next button. Rocket science at work. All right, so this screen, you will get one, and some of yours may look different. Some of the lab machines have 8 gigs of RAM, some have 16. Your own computer may have 4, 16, 24, who knows what. You need to keep it in the green zone. So this would give me 2,048 megabytes or 2 gigabytes of RAM. I don't think that's quite enough, so I'm going to bump it up, and I'm going to go somewhere around in here, 3.6. So I have enough memory to run this. And I can't go over into the red because that's our operating system that we're running the main system on. So somewhere in the green, Here's where it gets really hard. I'm going to click Next again, or Create. And I'm going to click Next again. And I'm going to do Next again. This is where we create a hard drive for that computer to start on. I am going to use, in this case, 50 gigabytes of storage. You need at least 25 for Windows 10. I'm not going to mess with it again. I'm just going to use the defaults. Wow, that was hard. But what I have done is just created the container. So I just built the physical computer, if you want to think about it that way. So now I have the hard part. Now I have to actually install Windows into this environment. So I'm going to click on this and I'm going to click the Start button. It'll also work if you double click it. So it's going to start. Now, here's the really creepy, weird, sad. I don't know how to fix it, and I wish I had a way to do it. I can't show you the next step because it always goes to the second monitor. But if you're here, it's popped up and it says Select Startup Disk. This is the same as if you started up your brand new computer, you didn't have an operating system on it. You have to point it to where that ISO file is. And so right now it says, I want to go to drive D or a CD drive. So you have to click on that little folder icon, and that folder icon will pop open this screen here. And this one I can move over, and I can say I want to go to the desktop, and I want to select Windows 10, and I want to open it. This one is the step that more students miss than any other step. I know that's kind of weird. So once I do that, now I can push Start, and then I can move this window over. So I want to point out where it lands. So while Windows is starting up here, notice here under Storage, Storage 0 says that's that hard drive I created. Port 1 is that ISO file, like it's in a drive, but it's a virtual CD drive. If I get a black screen that says no bootable medium found, that's the step I missed. Is I did not point it to the ISO file. It'd be like you started a brand new computer, but you're holding the CD for it in your hand instead of putting it in the computer. And so if you notice it here, I can actually click on that and I can choose a disk image from here. So if I mess that up, I have one last chance to fix it here, and I can go identify where it's at. So I don't need to change that necessarily now because it's right. But if that is blank or says D drive or something else, unless it says optical drive, Windows 64 ISO, or 32-bit if you're using that, you're going to get a no bootable medium found. And I can show you that. Let me power this one off. I think I can get that screen to show up on here. So if I change this and I say, oh, I just want host drive D, and I click Start, you're going to get this screen right up here in just a minute. You're going to get this, no bootable medium found, because it can't find anything to run. You didn't give it anywhere to run. So I can go back here. I'm going to power it off, and I'm going to go back here to host D, and I'm going to say I want, and it happens to be in the shortcut list. I can also click Choose Disk and then find it here. Bless you. Now I'm going to start it up, and we'll actually install Windows. And so there is one other crucial step that people tend to mess up in here, or that I have seen more people do. And we'll get to it here in just a little second. All right, so Windows 10 now is starting. We'll see how some of your computers are going to run through this really, really fast. Some of the older ones are a little slower. This one is the slowest one in the entire room, so I will tell you that. So yes, I'm going to install Windows. Yes, I want to install now. Ooh, 20 minutes, got it, perfect. All right, so setup is starting. You're going to get a screen right here. This is where you activate that Windows key that you downloaded. Here's what's really kind of cool. I'm going to skip that for now. And you can do the same thing. So yes, I am going to accept that I'm going to run Windows. Here's where it default says, hey, you're going to upgrade. You're not upgrading, you're creating a brand new one. So click Custom Install. It shows you there's my 50 gig drive. We're going to click Start. And now it's installing Windows right now. So it defaults to that upgrade. If I had slid this disk into a computer with Windows 8, it would try to upgrade it. But right now, we're just installing it. And so it will take a little bit to get through there. So what I want to get to is when we create a license for that particular machine. Because you need to not do a online sign-in from Microsoft, or you'll be sad. That seems to break on a fairly regular basis. All right, so while that's installing, make sure this looks like this, or you will get that no bootable medium found. So what's interesting then is I can have multiple operating systems here. And so if I want to try out my software, so maybe I'm a software designer, and I want to try it out on Windows 10, Windows 7, Windows XP, Ubuntu, or something else, I can have multiple operating systems, and I can run any of them I want to inside of this shell. So if I have a Mac, and I know that several of you guys do, this also gives you a place you can run a lot of our software we're going to show you in the class. You can actually run it inside of a Windows version. So 16% go slow thing. Probably should not be uploading at the same time I am doing this. Hang on. Report anything that I'll regret later. All right, so this time lapse to magically up to 96% and slowing along. So depending on the speed of your computer, you may be faster, you may be slower than this to install. What I have found, weirdly, if you have a fairly new MacBook, those actually smoke through this install. They will complete it in a couple of minutes in some cases. And then, there's you guys over there. Well, apparently 96 doesn't mean it's actually going to go to 97 then, huh? So. Did yours finish downloading? Oh. Oh, nice. It could be that there were too many people on trying to grab it because our file server is old and sad. And I tried to leave these on last year, and we had a student worker get really carried away. Deleted all the pieces from those. Warning. Ooh, interesting. All right, so now it's going to start up. Looks like Windows. It's got the little spinny dots. So in about 2 minutes, okay, 3 minutes according to the way it's installing now, there's another step to where people can get Crossways, and that is how to install it on a local account versus on the, what Microsoft would really like you to do is sign in with your Microsoft.com account, but inside the virtual environment it doesn't always work correctly. You know, the sad thing is I watched him reach over and hit the delete key for you. So once more of those download, once they finish downloading, then it'll go a little quicker. All right, getting devices ready. We're going to actually get to Windows here pretty soon. So unfortunately, my desktop computer up here was slow 6 years ago. We're still recording video and all kinds of stuff on it, and I haven't had a chance to throw in the other one. So getting ready. At some point it'll get ready.